Your name is in a file. Someone you knew in the past just gave a false statement to the authorities, and they put you in the middle of it. Not because you did anything wrong, but because you were there. Because you once had compassion for that person. And now, the house of cards they built is collapsing, and in the desperation of the fall, they pointed a finger in your direction. This isn't paranoia. This isn't exaggeration. This is what happens when you've been close to someone whose entire life was built on lies, and that structure finally collapses. Stay with me until the end of this video, because I'm going to show you exactly what's happening, why you are protected, and what you need to do now to get through this storm with your head held high without getting lost in a chaos that isn't yours. Let's begin. Think for a moment about the person who built a life of appearances. Maybe you met them at work, in business, in a relationship, in a social circle. They always seemed confident, always had a ready answer, a new project, a grand plan. The people around them admired the construction, the car, the office, the confident speech, the lifestyle that seemed to indicate real success. But you were up close, and you saw what others didn't. You noticed how direct questions were always deflected with a story, how the details never quite added up when you paid attention, how the people around them were used and then discarded one by one in a cycle that repeated with mechanical precision. There was always someone new being charmed, while the trail of damage behind grew longer and longer. You recognized something. Maybe you couldn't put it into words at the time, but something inside you sounded the alarm. A discomfort, a restlessness that wouldn't go away, a feeling that staying connected to that universe would eventually come with a price. And it was that perception that made you create distance. It wasn't a dramatic crisis. It wasn't an epic fight. It was a quiet, gradual, but intentional retreat. You started saying no where you used to say yes. You stopped saving the situation when the new crisis appeared. You stopped responding with the same urgency. You built a space between you and that energy, and that space was the attention. You need to prepare now. I put together an exclusive resource for those who feel set apart for something greater, but live surrounded by noise, distractions, and mental overload. This is a 30-day journey that will transform your life. A guided path to armor your mind and prepare for what's coming with daily practices of focus, boundaries, and discipline. Stop negotiating with the noise. Learn to spot distractions before they control you. And strengthen your mind. Also available in an immersive audio version. Over 10 Zuru readers have already transformed their lives through the 30-day journey. Thousands of people have already started this transformation. People like you who are tired of living in the fog. Ordinary people who decided to stop accepting mental chaos. Take advantage of this limited time offer only this month. Access your link just below in the pinned comment. Smartest thing you've ever done in your life. Now, exactly at the moment that structure is crumbling, you are at a safe distance. The tower is falling and you are not inside it. But there's an uncomfortable detail. You were there when it was being built. This is where the story gets complicated. And this is where I need you to pay close attention, because this distinction can literally change everything for you. There's a brutal difference between having been present and having participated, between having known someone and having been an accomplice, between having witnessed something and having contributed to it. That difference is so obvious to anyone with healthy reasoning that it would be impossible to confuse. The problem is that there's someone now with an interest in erasing that line, in making it seem like your presence was participation, in turning your past compassion into invented complicity. Think carefully about what's happening. A person whose world is crumbling, who has had resources seized, who is being questioned by authorities, who is seeing everything they built on sand being swept away by the tide, that person is desperate. And in desperation, they are trying to do what people like that always do, create enough smoke to confuse whoever is looking. If I throw enough mud, maybe some of it will stick to someone. If I mention enough names, maybe the investigators will get lost in 1,000 directions and the attention will be off me long enough. If I build a narrative where other people also seem involved, maybe I'll stop being the sole focus. That's the logic. And you need to understand that this logic is the only fuel feeding the fire that's trying to burn you now. But before we continue, I need to stop here and ask you a direct question. Have you ever noticed how there's a specific type of person who never takes full responsibility for what happens in their own life? There's always an external culprit. There's always a circumstance that conspired against them. There's always someone who betrayed them, who harmed them, who didn't do what they should have done. The boss was unfair, the partner was dishonest, the system was corrupt, the family didn't support them, friends abandoned them. That narrative of chronic victimhood isn't an accident. It's a psychological survival strategy. When you're never responsible for anything, you never have to change anything. You can stay exactly as you are, making the same decisions, repeating the same patterns, and the blame will always find an address different from yours. The problem is that this strategy has a cost. It requires a constant flow of people to blame. And when the crisis grows, when the consequences arrive with enough force that they can no longer be ignored, the desperation to find someone to blame grows proportionally. That's exactly what happened here. The person involving you in this story isn't doing it because you deserve it. They're doing it because you are the most convenient name available. You were present. You have a shared history with them. And shared history can be distorted. It can be retold from different angles. It can be presented in ways that suggest things that never actually existed. But suggestion is not evidence. Proximity is not participation. And a convenient narrative is not the truth. Now I want you to do something. Take a deep breath. Seriously, take a deep breath and follow me in this logical reasoning. If you were actually involved in any illegal or irregular activity, there would be a trail. There is no crime without evidence. There is no participation without a footprint. Financial movements, communications in writing, audio, any digital channel, your presence in specific places on specific dates, signed documents, decisions made that can be traced back to you. Multiple independent witnesses who could corroborate the story in a coherent and verifiable way. Evidence is concrete. Evidence builds a case that withstands scrutiny. Evidence survives cross-referencing, timeline verification, logical analysis. A story is something completely different. A story is what a desperate person tells when they don't have real evidence to present. It's noise. It's the finger-pointing of someone trying not to sink alone. It's smoke manufactured in the hope that the smoke will be mistaken for fire. And there is a monumental chasm between the two. That chasm is your solid ground. It's where you stand while the other person flails in quicksand. When investigators confront the allegations with the real facts, the story will begin to unravel at the seams. The timeline won't close. The logistics won't make sense. The invented details won't survive basic checking. And the accusations will reveal themselves to be exactly what they are. Desperate attempts to transfer blame from someone who has it in abundance to someone who has nothing to do with the scenario. But here, I need to be honest with you about something that goes beyond the legal question. Because what's happening now isn't just a legal problem, it's a spiritual test. It's a test of everything you've been building inside yourself. How long have you been working to clear your life of these draining connections, to build real boundaries, not just in your head, but in practice, to stop taking responsibility for the chaos other people create? This person represents a pattern, a type of energy you've been learning to recognize and move away from. Maybe it wasn't just them. Maybe throughout your life, you've encountered different versions of this same person. The partner who drained resources while promising a future. The business associate who used your reputation to give legitimacy to dubious projects. The friend who was always in crisis, always needing rescue, but who never actually changed because the crisis was their way of keeping people around. There was always this pattern of taking while you gave, of creating problems while you tried to solve them, of calling you into the chaos just when the chaos exploded. And at some point, you recognize the hard truth. Genuine help only works when the person wants to change. What this person wanted wasn't help. It was an enabler, someone to cushion the consequences of not changing, someone to be available to be called upon when the chips were down, someone whose name could be used when it was convenient. When you stopped accepting that role, something changed in the relationship. They probably tried to bring you back with guilt, reminded you of everything you owed to your relationship, promised change once again, created a new crisis to see if the old reflex to save would appear. But you stood firm, and that firmness is exactly what's being tested now, because this person's last move is also the most desperate one, using the system to try to pull you back into the problem. Subscribe to the channel if you're going through a situation where people from your past are trying to involve you in schemes that have nothing to do with who you are today. Click the bell so you don't miss the next videos, because the journey we're tracing together gets deeper each week. Now let me talk about what's happening in your body as you process all of this. You feel a chill in your stomach, an activation in your nervous system that doesn't go away with breathing or distraction, racing thoughts on a loop, trying to predict the worst possible scenario. A constant feeling that something is wrong, that a threat is approaching, but you can't see it clearly enough to act. This has a name. This is threat hypervigilance. And your nervous system is doing exactly what it was programmed to do, alert you to a real danger. The thing is, there's a critical difference between recognizing the threat and being consumed by it. Recognizing is functional. Recognizing prepares you. Recognizing makes you take the right actions. Seek legal guidance if necessary. Gather documentation that proves your timeline. Talk to trusted people who can testify to your conduct over time. Being consumed by the threat, on the other hand, is exactly what the other person wants. Because someone consumed by fear makes poor decisions, makes contact when they shouldn't, tries to explain when silence would be more strategic, becomes reactive instead of strategic. And reactivity is vulnerability. So the first practical thing you need to do is anchor your nervous system. This isn't superficial self-help talk. This is the science of human behavior under pressure. When you're in threat mode, the part of your brain responsible for logical reasoning literally functions with less blood and oxygen. You think worse. You decide worse. You act worse. Reducing physiological activation isn't weakness. It's the necessary condition for you to make the best decisions in the worst situation. I'll give you the structure for how to get through this. First step, do not react. Do not call this person. Do not send a message. Do not try to solve it through conversation. Any direct communication now can be misinterpreted, taken out of context, used to create the appearance of an active relationship when you've spent years precisely building distance. Strategic silence isn't cowardice, it's protection. Second step, document everything you can about your history. Not because you'll need to defend yourself from something you didn't do, but because having clarity about your own timeline puts you in a position of safety. Dates, places, digital records, conversations, everything that shows where you were and what you were doing during the period in question. Reality is the ally of those who lived the truth. Third step, if the investigations do reach you, which may or may not happen, but if they do, speak with a lawyer before speaking with any authority. Not because you have something to hide, but because the words of innocent people are often misinterpreted when spoken without proper guidance. A lawyer isn't a sign of guilt, it's a sign of intelligence. Fourth step, take care of your allies, the people who truly know you, who have witnessed your conduct over time, who know how you operate. They are your most powerful shield. Not the shield of a public fight, but the shield of verifiable truth for those who matter. Now I want to go to a deeper level, because there's something spiritual happening here that goes beyond the immediate crisis. Have you heard of the law of consequences? Not in the simplified sense of karma as divine punishment, but in the literal sense that every structure built on false foundations eventually collapses under the weight of its own falsity. Not because the universe is punishing someone, but because reality has a natural tendency to correct itself. A lie needs another lie to sustain it. A scheme needs layers of growing complexity to not collapse. A life of appearances needs constant energy to keep the facade standing. The more time passes, the heavier the burden of keeping the fiction coherent becomes, until the point where the weight exceeds the capacity of the one carrying it. That's what you're witnessing now. It's not the end of someone who was once your friend, your associate, your partner. It's the natural correction of a trajectory that was never sustainable. The collapse doesn't begin today. It has been built by years of decision upon decision that prioritized appearance over substance, the shortcut over the process, the quick win over real building. You felt this before you could prove it. And that perception that made you create distance was, in fact, a spiritual gift, a form of wisdom that operates on a frequency below conscious reasoning, something that recognized the instability before it manifested visibly. This ability to perceive, to recognize patterns before they explode, isn't paranoia, it's discernment. And discernment is one of the most valuable resources a human being can cultivate. I'll tell you a story that happens in families more often than people admit. Imagine a man in his early 40s, let's call him Robert. Robert had a cousin who was always the type living on the edge, always with a new business that was going to change everything, always asking for a favor here, a referral there, a loan that would be repaid soon. Robert helped for years, opened doors, lent money, put his name alongside in some situations because he believed the promises. But over time, Robert began to realize that businesses never really took off, that the money never came back, that the doors he opened were used for things he hadn't been fully informed about, and that the cousin always had a new explanation to justify why things hadn't worked as promised. Robert distanced himself. Not in a dramatic way, he simply stopped being available, stopped responding at the same pace, stopped automatically saying yes. 2 years later, the cousin found himself at the center of an investigation for irregularities in contracts, and in a moment of desperation, he cited Robert's name to the authorities as someone who would have participated in certain decisions. Robert hadn't participated in anything, but the name was there. What saved Robert wasn't luck. It was the trail of his own life. The bank statements showing no suspicious activity, the people who could confirm where he was and what he was doing, the coherence between what he stated and what the facts showed, and the evident incoherence between the cousin's version and any objective verification of the facts. The cousin's story didn't survive the first cross-checking of data, and Robert came out of that episode not only cleared, but with a definitive clarity about the type of relationship he would never again accept in his own life. That story is your story. The names and details change. The pattern is the same. But let's be honest about the emotional weight of all this. Even when you know you did nothing wrong, the idea of having your name associated with an investigation is disturbing on a very basic level. It's not just logic. It's about your reputation. It's about what the people you respect will think. It's about the fear of being misunderstood, of having years of integrity questioned because of a narrative fabricated by someone in panic. That fear is legitimate. You don't need to pretend it doesn't exist. But you need to understand that your real reputation, the one built action by action over years, doesn't come undone with an accusation. The people who truly know you won't change their perception of who you are because of a story that doesn't add up. Your conduct over time is the most powerful argument there is. And for the people who don't know you, who will hear the story secondhand, the truth tends to make itself clear over time. Not always immediately, not always at the speed you'd like, but over time, the incoherence of a fabricated narrative becomes visible to those with open eyes. I want you to consider the possibility that this moment, as uncomfortable as it is, has something to teach you. Not in the sense that you deserve to go through this, but in the sense that every crisis carries within it a clarity that calmness cannot produce. What is this situation showing you about the boundaries you still need to reinforce? About the past connections you still haven't completely resolved within yourself? About the narratives you carry about responsibility, about guilt, about the obligation to save people who choose not to save themselves? Sometimes, a person who spent years trying to help those who didn't want to be helped carries a residual guilt for having walked away. A feeling that they should have stayed longer, tried more, done more, and that residual guilt is exactly the hook that a manipulative person knows how to exploit. If you're feeling something like that now, it's important to name it. You owe this person nothing. You are not responsible for the choices they made. You couldn't have changed the outcome by staying. Your presence wouldn't have saved anything because the problem was never your absence. The problem was the way they saw the world and the decisions they chose to make. You walked away to protect your peace. That was correct, that was healthy, that was wise. And now, in this moment, when their structure is crumbling, your responsibility isn't to go in and try to contain the damage. It's to remain outside, firm on the ground you built for yourself, like this video if this is touching something you've been carrying. Every like tells me this content is reaching those who need it, and that helps me continue to bring this kind of depth here on the channel. There's a concept I want to introduce here, and it comes from both modern psychology and ancient spiritual traditions. The concept of energetic contagion. Not in the superficial, mystical sense, in the practical and verifiable sense that the people you spend time with shape your patterns of behavior, your decisions, your way of seeing the world, and eventually the results you reap in your own life. Jim Rohn, one of the great thinkers in human development, said, "You are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with." And that's not motivational poetry. There are decades of research in social psychology confirming that people's behaviors, attitudes, and even financial results are strongly influenced by their closest reference group. When you spent time close to this person, something of their energy contaminated your perception of what was normal. Maybe you began to accept certain behaviors that would have bothered you before. Maybe you normalized imprecision, exaggeration, vague promises. Maybe you tolerated situations that, seen from the outside, would be clearly problematic. This isn't a character flaw on your part. It's the nature of social contagion. We are relational beings, and our psychology is calibrated by the human environment around us. The important point here is this. When you created distance, you initiated a process of decontamination, of recalibrating your own patterns back to what is real, what is sustainable, what is true. This process takes time, and sometimes one last wave of turbulence, exactly like the one you're going through now, is part of the complete decontamination. It's as if the universe is testing whether the separation is indeed definitive, whether the boundaries you built are real or just temporary, whether you will, under pressure, go back to accepting the role this person always wanted you to have. The answer you give now, by maintaining firmness, not reacting, not letting yourself be pulled back into the chaos, is the answer that once and for all seals your liberation from this pattern. Let me talk now about what will happen in the next steps. The fabricated story will meet reality. And when that happens, the incoherence will become evident. Investigators are trained to identify inconsistencies, to cross-reference information, to notice when a timeline doesn't close, when the logistics of an accusation don't make sense, when the motivation behind a statement is more about self-protection than about revealing the truth. Desperation has a signature, and statements given by desperate people carry that signature in a recognizable way for those who know how to read it. You are not the real target of this investigation. You are a name thrown in to create confusion. And confusion created by a compromised source, by someone who clearly has personal motives to divert attention, is treated with appropriate skepticism. This doesn't mean the process will be instant or painless. There may be questions, there may be discomfort, there may be a period where you'll need to have patience while the truth establishes itself in its own time. But the ground beneath your feet is solid. You built on real foundations, and real foundations withstand pressure in ways false foundations never can. Now I want to talk about an aspect many people neglect in this type of situation: energetic protection. This might sound abstract to some, but stay with me. When you spend years working to clear your life of toxic connections, to build boundaries, to operate with integrity, you are, in spiritual terms, building a field of protection around your life. An internal coherence that functions as an anchor. This coherence isn't invisible to the universe, and the universe, if you believe in something greater than chance, doesn't abandon those who choose the path of integrity. I'm not talking about magical protection that makes difficulties disappear. I'm talking about something more subtle and more powerful, the way everything aligns when you are on the right side. The right people appear at the right time. The information you need arrives when you need it. The resources to face the situation reveal themselves in ways that weren't obvious before. This isn't coincidence. This is the coherence of your trajectory manifesting as support. You are not alone in this. Not only because there are people around you who know you and can testify to your conduct, but because there is something greater operating in favor of those who chose to build with truth. I want to share an image that might help you hold this moment. Imagine two boats at sea. One boat was built with quality materials, every joint checked, every beam tested, every part of the hull built to last. The other was built with cheap materials, a nice appearance on the outside, but a compromised structure from the start. When the sea is calm, both boats float. You can't even tell the difference looking from afar, but when the storm arrives, the difference is revealed. The boat built with quality faces the waves, creaks, sways, but holds. The boat with a compromised structure begins to come apart at the joints. Water comes in, and the crew's desperation doesn't change the physics of the situation. You are the boat built with quality. The storm that's coming will test the structure, but the structure will hold because it was built for it. We are already reaching the end of this video, and I want to leave you with some practical anchors for the coming days. First anchor: do not feed fear with speculation. The mental loop of imagining the worst possible scenarios doesn't protect you. It only exhausts the resources you'll need to act with clarity when necessary. Second anchor: trust your trajectory. The integrity accumulated over time isn't erased by an accusation. It's recorded in every person you've interacted with, in every decision you've made, in every moment you chose the longer but more honest path. Third anchor: remain present, not in the crisis. It's very easy to spend the next days completely absorbed by a situation that in reality may resolve in ways you can't yet see. Remaining present means continuing to live your life, continuing your projects, maintaining your routines, not because you're denying the problem, but because you trust the structure you built. Fourth anchor: know when to act and when to wait. Not every threat requires immediate action. Sometimes the most powerful action is strategic inaction. Not reacting, not contacting, not explaining to those who haven't asked. Letting reality manifest without your premature interference. Fifth anchor, take care of those by your side. At this moment, relationships of trust are your most precious asset, not the public relationships or utilitarian connections. The relationships where there is mutual truth, where people know you, in fact, where you can be seen with clarity. These bonds are your real safety net. And one last thing, this moment will pass, not because problems disappear on their own, but because truth has a gravitational pull that draws everything toward it over time. The person who built their life on lies will reap the result of that, not as punishment, but as the natural and inevitable consequence of years of choices. You will reap the result of your trajectory too, not as an automatic reward, but as the natural expression of who you chose to be over time. And when this storm passes, and it will pass, you will be standing, not in the same place you were before, because crises move us, but firmer. Attention, you need to prepare now. I put together an exclusive resource for those who feel set apart for something greater, but live surrounded by noise, distractions, and mental overload. This is a 30-day journey that will transform your life. A guided path to armor your mind and prepare for what's coming with daily practices of focus, boundaries, and discipline. Stop negotiating with the noise. Learn to spot distractions before they control you, and strengthen your mind. Also available in an immersive audio version. Over 10 Zuzazara readers have already transformed their lives through the 30-day journey. Thousands of people have already started this transformation. People like you who are tired of living in the fog. Ordinary people who decided to stop accepting mental chaos. Take advantage of this limited time offer only this month. Access your link just below in the pinned comment.